judge in Los Angeles will decide if the government can continue to hold Khaleil. And joining me now is Rmzi Qasem. He is the lawyer for Mahmoud Khaleil and co-director of CLEAR, an organisation that represents other students facing deportation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Can I first ask, given this hearing is expected in the next few hours, what you are expecting to come from today's hearing?
Well, the immigration judge in Louisiana, where Mr. Khaleil is being detained in an ICE detention facility in a rural part of the state of Louisiana, that immigration judge has indicated that today she wants to rule on whether or not Mr. Khaleil is deportable. That doesn't mean that if she finds him deportable, he gets deported right away. There is process that takes longer, but it is highly unusual for an immigration case to move so quickly. The government produced its evidence, as you mentioned, the day before yesterday, and here we are this afternoon going into a hearing where the judge wants to rule on the question of deportability, having given our side less than 2 days to prepare our case.
And on the evidence put forward by the government, what they're basically saying is that Khaleil can be expelled for his beliefs alone. Where does that sit under the evidentiary standard required by immigration law?
Yeah, and that is a remarkably a stunning proposition, right? It's a very aggressive proposition by the government that essentially, because Marco Rubio says so, a green card holder, a permanent resident of the United States, can be taken into detention and found removable simply because Marco Rubio says so in a 2-page memo and believes that for some reason this person constitutes a foreign policy problem of some kind because of their speech. Now, if that is the appropriate use of this law, and we don't believe that it is, we think the law is being abused, but if that is the appropriate use of this law, then it runs directly into the Constitution of the United States. And of course, the Constitution and the First Amendment, which protects free speech, will always trump any law. And so our view is that that's not how this law is supposed to be used to punish people for speaking up in support of Palestinian rights. And if this is an appropriate use of the law, then it is unconstitutional.
And in light of what you're saying, I think it's worth us pointing out a social media post that was posted by ICE claiming it is their job to stop illegal ideas. This was the original post, from crossing the border. They did then delete that post and shared another one saying it was their job to prevent intellectual property from crossing the border, correcting themselves, different wording, but similar concepts here. So to your point, I mean, this speaks to a broader crackdown on freedom of speech.
That's exactly right. And it is not what one would expect in an open society that is committed to the rule of law, that is committed to free speech for all. And so, what Mahmoud Khaleil was saying, and what other student activists and students who have been detained or at threat of detention were saying, was really very basic and uncontroversial, that Palestinians deserve to live, that they have human rights too. But even if you happen to disagree with that, then you should still be concerned, because what the government is doing here is basically using immigration enforcement as a first step to undermine the First Amendment, to throw people out of the country simply because they happen to be saying things that the current government disagrees with or dislikes, whether it's pro-Palestinian speech that's critical of Israel or United States foreign policy, reproductive rights speech, LGBTQ rights speech. There's a long laundry list of issues that this administration disagrees with. And so this would set us on a path, a slippery slope, towards authoritarian like rule, very different from what you would expect in an open society.
Yeah, and of course this is not an isolated case here with your client Mahmoud Khaleil. We're seeing this playing out in many other states, and we saw Republican Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana signed a letter asking for all university records connected to students for justice in Palestine. It's interesting to note the fact that he's from Louisiana, where your other client, Ramesa Ozturk, is also being held. Why are they taking this fight to other states? Under what jurisdiction?
Well, the government's strategy here is twofold. There's a political dimension and a legal dimension. The legal dimension is that for whatever reason, the government seems to believe that it's going to have a better chance in Louisiana immigration courts and in Louisiana federal courts, and it prefers the case law down there in that region and the judges in that region. That seems to be the legal strategy to their dimension. The political dimension to their strategy is, of course, to isolate people like Mahmoud Khalil and Rumeisa Ozturk and Dr. Badr Khansuri from their communities, from their families, from their lawyers, and to hope that by putting them in these remote locations, the media attention to this outrage will die down, the popular mobilization and opposition to this outrage will die down and dissipate, and that they'll be able to get away with it, essentially. So I feel like that those two dimensions are certainly at play, and you see the government trying to speed up the immigration cases in courts that they control, where they can fire the judges, and trying to slow down the federal cases that the prisoners are bringing, asking for their own liberation before, their own freedom before federal judges who are independent of the government.